Welcome! We're here with Maureen Farrell in A Range of Emotion, 20 Years of Painting. Maureen is a local artist here to Cambridge and has a studio in the Davis Art Center in Easton. and we are so lucky to have 72 of her 20 years worth of work. She's here to talk with us today about it. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Dorchester Center for the Arts, for exhibiting my work, and a huge thank you to you and Lisa Crentel for showcasing my work and making it look absolutely stunning. I really appreciate it.
Wonderful, thank you. One of the first big works that you kind of come upon is the Alike But Different, and I'm correct that it's won an award recently, right?
Yes, it took a Juror's Choice Award at the Maryland Federation of Arts for #Woman, which was a real important show for me to be in. It started out as an abstract, and after working on it for a couple of days, I got a little frustrated and splashed some paint on and went home. And when I went back the next day to look at it, I realized that by just putting a few circles up there, making heads, I could have some figures. So that's how that one came about.
Wonderful. And as you see, as we progress, there's kind of a mix of like figurative and representational abstract. This is the Tides Dance and the Just Imagine. Do you want to speak on that one?
This is another piece that I had in Easton working, and I really wasn't sure what to do with it, and in frustrations I put my paintbrush into some gesso and splattered across the paper and went home. And the next day I stood back and looked at it for 15-20 minutes and realized that I could put a figure in right here. So I did, and she evolved.
Yeah.
Not planned in the least.
How would you say with these two, they both had similar stories of kind of working on it, going away, working on it, going away. How much or how long would you say a piece takes you, and how important is separation or like the time that you're kind of away from the piece to your process?
A small piece I can do in 2 sessions. Some of these larger ones, it can take a week, a couple of weeks, and I need separation from my work, because if I don't, I overwork it and destroy it. So separation is a good thing.
Yes, yes. Here we are with some more figuratives and some abstract landscapes. Why don't we talk about Alan? It's kind of the first real face that we see in the show, and it's definitely in a different medium. Would you tell us about that?
Yes, Alan is a portrait of a friend of mine. When I first started, I worked strictly from photographs, and this process is watercolor on gesso, and I had a sheet of watercolor paper and covered it with gesso, which is a white paint with binder and chalk in it. I let it dry for 24 hours, and then I went back in with watercolor. And once the watercolor dried, and the watercolor was all over the paper, that was just random. And then I had it propped up on an easel, and with a wet paintbrush, I went in and removed some of the paint. And actually I was working on a cross-country ski machine. And so I worked, and I look, and I get off the machine and wipe off a little bit more paint. And actually the portrait came through on the paper. So it's an unusual process, but it's cool to work with. But it's hard. I mean, if you sneeze, droplets of water, the paint will come off. So you have to be careful. You have to go slow.
How often would you say you work in this method?
I did that for probably a year.
Very cool. As we continue down the hall, we kind of have more figures on our left and then more figures on our right, but these figures have things in the background or have more textural elements. Could you tell me about that process or the addition of elements?
Sure. For a while, I glued down newspaper articles, music paper, paper towels, Asian paper, and I'm trying to remember what this is called. It'll come to me.
No worries.
And then after I glued things down, then I went back in and started putting paint down without any idea of what I was going to do with it. I didn't know if it was going to be a floral or a figure, and through the process something comes through and then I go with it. But I never had a set idea of what I'm... Cheesecloth. This is cheesecloth. I don't have any set idea when I paint. When I first started with watercolors, I always painted from photographs, but that has changed. It's a bit of a challenge, but it's more exciting.
Yeah, I can imagine. Do the newspaper clippings or kind of backgrounds that you choose, are they random? Or
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they are. They're random. I've had family members bring newspapers from different countries.
Oh, wow.
And that's cool. And then it's like, what does it say?
So I noticed in Just Us, these images have faces, but in a lot of the other works throughout the exhibit, there isn't. There's kind of more of a silhouette or a faceless style to them. Is there a reason why?
Yes, I deliberately don't put faces into my paintings because most people will look to figure out who it is. And by leaving them faceless, you can put your own story to the painting. You can put your own figures in. And it's interesting to stand back and listen to people talk about what they think the painting is about or who it looks like, rather than looking and saying, well, it really doesn't look like a particular person. So,
Very cool. And then as we move through this part of the hallway, we have what I would call more traditional watercolors. You said that these are your earlier works?
yes, they are. This one here with the little boat was my very first framed watercolor, and that was when I learned how to do washes, which took me almost a year because I didn't paint all the time. I was working for the post office, so it took a long time to become accomplished with just a wash. And from there I moved on because I loved the medium.
So you noted that you had worked for the post office. Is art something that's always been in your life, or is it something that kind of came in later years? Or
Yes, I have no formal art education. I was looking for a class in meditation, and where we lived in upstate New York, it was not available, but a watercolor class was, and my husband suggested I take it, and I said, I can't paint and I can't draw, and he said, just take it. It will be very meditative. And it was, but I had no idea it was the hardest medium to work with at the time. And so it was meditative because I spent a lot of time trying to learn the medium. But yeah, I was 47 when I picked up a paintbrush for the first time. As a matter of fact, my first watercolor class, I showed up with a little kid's paint box and paintbrush. I had no clue.
And we can see in this corner just how many different mediums and styles you've chosen for representational and representationally abstract to completely abstract. How would you say your process has evolved, or your stylistic process throughout these 20 plus years?
I took watercolor classes from a woman in my hometown, and she was the one that graduated onto acrylic and mixed medium, and she really pushed for me to take classes with her, and I struggled. And I had to devote a full year to learning the medium without painting watercolor, and I liked it so much that I haven't painted in watercolors since. It's a challenge. It's definitely a challenge, but there's so much more you can do with it. So that's why I'm still doing the mixed media. I might go back to watercolor at some point because it's very portable. You can take it anywhere.
And then here by itself, we have the largest piece of the show. You want to talk about this one?
Sure. This is the largest painting I've ever done on watercolor paper, and it came about through a self-guided workshop I took in Maine 3 years ago. I had never done anything like this before in my life. And this has graphite and charcoal. I wrote a little bit in here, a lot of scrubbing out, and just coming up with something out of nothing. It was difficult but very exciting, and I just couldn't believe that I had painted that once I got through with it and saw the results. And this I worked on for several weeks.
Very cool. And then we arrive in the main gallery, which hosts, I believe, some of your newest works. We have a mix of the ones that have the backgrounds and the watercolors, the abstract, the figurative, but I'm curious about this one in its use of the words in the background that look like they're added. How do you add those, or how do you select those to add into your works?
That particular piece has the newspaper underneath it, and once again, I didn't know what I was doing. I had no plan, no plan. And I put the figure on, and as I sat in my studio, I needed a story, so I went through poetry books looking for poems, and that is an oil-based pen that I was able to write part of a poem on, and it adds a little bit more interest than just the fabric or the newsprint. It's a richness I'm looking for in my work.
Wonderful. Yeah. And then as we continue on, I believe that this one was the last piece you painted for this show?
Yes, it is. And she almost didn't make it in it because I was just not happy. I worked on this painting off and on for 2 or 3 months. There are a lot of layers underneath her. There was a lot of red in here, and this color was all up in here. I wound up adding tissue paper and some Asian paper and more up there to give it the richness, because it just felt dead. And the more I added and removed, the more alive she came. So I'm pleased with her, with the way she came through. And I see somebody else.
Yes.
Somebody else likes her enough too. So yes.
So you've been creating during the pandemic. How has that been on your artistic process? Has it aided it having the time, or has it actually kind of been hard to create in this type of environment?
I had a very, very difficult time during the pandemic. I sat and cried in my studio a lot of times and just could not paint. And a friend of mine suggested that I just journal on paper, so I did. And when I started writing about the loss and the frustrations and the fear and people not getting well, as I wrote that, I started to erase a little bit so you couldn't see the words, and then put paint on top, and then figures started to come through. And as a result, that helped me to get back to doing what I need to do, which is paint. It puts me in a different place.
Wonderful. And then as we continue on, I'm gonna pick out Overwhelmed. It's on our postcard, and you mentioned that they're the Saran Wrap ladies, if I'm correct. You wanna talk about that?
Yes. The background has multitudes of color, and I had journaled a little bit and used charcoal mark making, and I still didn't know what to do. So I put black paint on Saran Wrap and then put it on the paper and pulled it off. And most of the black that you see was on the Saran Wrap, and the colors, some of them I filled in, some of them were part of the background, and then I put the heads in. It's a little, you can only do it once. I mean, once you do that, unless you gesso over and start the whole painting all over again. Once you put that down, it's there.
Very cool. And then as we move through, we kind of have some more landscapes and some more of the newspaper figurative work and completely abstract. Is there anything else you'd like to say, or have we touched on it all?
Not really, other than the fact that I've been a good example for my children and grandchildren, never having had art classes, to start something middle age and have it be a passion, and be able to work with my passion as I get older. And it's a thrill. I'm a student for the rest of my life because I constantly want to learn and improve, which is why I'm constantly trying to grow. I'm not satisfied status quo.
Wonderful. You can view the exhibit Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. On Thursday, our hours are noon to 6 p.m. And on Friday and Saturday, our hours are 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. And the show will be up through the end of the month. There are tons of works and some that we didn't even touch on, so please stop by and view this amazing exhibit.